all three teams now that he's considering: the Clippers, the Lakers, and of course the Toronto Raptors. And I think a decision is relatively imminent here. I think it probably can't go on too much longer. I think for him to be able to process what are three very different situations, two different countries, two different markets, and very three teams built in very different ways. Listen, it makes sense for him to think this through, take time. Whether it was Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, it was clear by the time they got to free agency, it seemed as though they knew exactly what they were going to do. That's not the case with Kawhi Leonard. And yes, it holds up a few role players around the league. But in the end, role players wait for stars in the NBA. And, stars like Kawhi Leonard are what drive revenue in the NBA. They're what drive interest in the NBA. And everyone else waits on them. I mean, players, Danny Green, and you understand Danny Green's, I don't know, frustration is the word, but certainly anticipation to be able to decide where he's going to go next. He has 2 championship rings because of Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, quickly on that, let's touch on the 2 primary names that are probably being held up, if you will, by this. Danny Green is one of them. DeMarcus Cousins is the other. What are the circumstances for those guys as they wait for this decision?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure even DeMarcus Cousins. I think Marcus Morris is a player whose decision hinges on this one too. And it's kind of easy. If Kawhi Leonard goes to the Lakers, well, then there's a lot of cap space in Dallas for Danny Green, for a Marcus Morris. If Kawhi goes elsewhere and the Lakers cap space is open, well, then those players fit into LA.
That's Woj, and we'll be keeping an eye on you as you are keeping an ear on this entire situation, and we'll check back in as the events warrant. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
Adrian Wojnarowski.
Thanks, Greedy.
Okay, let's bring this to the table here for the first time. And, we were kicking this around. Look, we're going to joke around about this because it almost does feel like it's become sort of a recurring joke. We're just waiting on Kawhi and waiting on Kawhi. But as you think about it here, Farnham, I'll start with you. What are the factors that you think he is weighing that might stretch out into the several days that this has?
And you brought this up yesterday. Look, if everybody doesn't jump in all in on Sunday and go, hey, this is where we're going, then all week long, we're talking about these other guys making their decisions, and then Kawhi's kind of at a natural, normal pace. But because everything happened on Sunday, now we've been sitting there for 4 days going, all right, what's going on? Ever since Monday show ended and we recapped Sunday, it's been what's going on here. I think it's very realistic is length of contract. How long does he want to sign a contract for? With what team? And does it vary dependent upon the team that he signs with? The length of which he wants to be part of that team and lock himself in. The other thing that you have to look at, too, is where do you want to live? Do you want to come back home? Were you comfortable enough in Toronto to make that your home during the season and still come back to LA in the offseason? And then the last aspect of it is, did you find out and discover that you became such a bigger name, I think, this year, being part of the Eastern Conference, winning this championship with Toronto? Is life in the Eastern Conference easier that will allow you to have more longevity at the top of that food chain as far as players go in the NBA?
Something else I would throw into the conversation, and Bontemps, I would turn to you as one who covers the league as you do, that it may sound like going to the Lakers is a no-brainer. Oh, LeBron and Anthony Davis, and now we're just going to go crazy and win. I think there may be a lot of factors in that also to consider. One of them is Anthony Davis is not locked in there for more than one season. I think we all assume he'll re-sign there, but there are certainly no guarantees of that. And beyond him, there really is no future. They've traded away practically everything. So he may be looking with sort of a fine-tooth comb at, if I do sign with the Lakers, what does that look like 2, 3, 4 years down the road?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the Lakers went all in on Anthony Davis, traded away basically their entire next decade's worth of draft picks. What happens if Anthony Davis doesn't like it in L.A. and decides to leave? I mean, remember, Dwight Howard got traded to L.A. It was going to be him and Kobe Bryant for this entire decade, right? That was going to be the next super team. He stayed there a year. He went to Houston. I mean, if that happens, then what are you looking at in L.A.? It's going to be a big mess. And you've also got LeBron James, who's going to be going into his age 35 season. He's played, I think the third most minutes of any player in the history of the sport, right? What if he breaks down? Then what do you have? So there are a lot of questions for him to answer there.
Jacoby, what do you think?
Here's one thing I find is interesting, and we talked to Woj about the implications of Danny Green and Marcus Morris and Boogie Cousins, but one thing I'm looking at is Kawhi makes his decision is there's entire cities that are waiting for this. Boston, Philadelphia, Milwaukee. That's those top of the Eastern Conference. If he leaves the Eastern Conference, those cities now have true belief that they're going to be in the NBA Finals because all three of those teams got better this offseason or tried to on paper, and they're waiting for this decision. If he leaves the Eastern Conference, all three of those cities now are looking at their teams and saying, we're going to the finals.
Well, and say the Golden State Warriors, too, right? We keep talking about Bobby Marks' prediction. They're going to miss the playoffs. If Kawhi goes to the Clippers, there's another team that's going to obviously make the playoffs that puts teams like that on the bubble, too.
Yeah, we'll talk more about the Clippers later on in the show. The one thing that sticks out to me is, you said this off the top, it's really only been 110 hours. It feels like it's been a really long time, but for a decision of this magnitude for him, it could be some of these little details. I bet they're caught up in some of the minutia there with maybe what the contract could look like, kind of to your point. And the other thing about Kawhi is I wouldn't be surprised if he just said, you know what, I'm going to make my announcement on Friday the 5th, and that's when I'm doing it, and so I don't care what everybody else says.
The reality is, beyond the players like Danny Green, who's his close friend, who is being held up by this, there isn't any obvious reason for him to rush. No one's going to do anything that is going to change anything until he makes this move. Everyone else has decided. Sort of smart if you think about it. Sit back, let the landscape settle, figure out where everybody is, and then make your choice. So we anticipate, maybe in a hopeful manner, that we will find this out today. We have an afternoon special, but we'll wait and we'll see. And obviously, we'll be here with you as this thing goes on. Now, in the meantime, we have been talking a lot all week long about a possible LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kawhi Leonard super team. And there is no doubt that that would be exactly that. That threesome would be a heavy favorite to win the championship next year. But if you look at the Lakers, they are already favorites to win the title. As we speak, with or without Kawhi, they are the favorites to win the title at plus 140. If they sign Kawhi, that drops all the way down to minus 200. For those who are not versed in this, those are very significant. That's an odds-on favorite with the Lakers to win the championship. By perspective, the Warriors were plus 125 as the title favorites last summer. So, yesterday, Sean, you did your top 5 NBA trios going back to the merger, and we talked about what these guys would have to do in order to sort of burst into that. And your list was controversial, to say the least. But let's just for a moment imagine that Kawhi Leonard does choose the Lakers, and we put those 3 guys together. Yeah. The way you put your list together, 3 years seems to be sort of the benchmark. You need 3 good years together in order to establish yourself as one of the great cheerers of all time. So if I put an over-under, if Kawhi goes there, at 1.5 championships in the next 3 years, to win 1.5 titles in the next 3 years with those 3 guys together, would you go over or under?
I would go over. I think that with the talent you're talking about there, I mean, you're talking about the best two-way player in the NBA in Kawhi Leonard. You're talking about the most dominant player we've seen in the last decade in the NBA in LeBron James, and a player in Anthony Davis that's clearly in the top 5 in the NBA. So when you look at that list, you're going, okay, how could things go wrong? If you just put some complementary pieces around them, and it doesn't really matter as much as who they are. Can you shoot? Good. Stand in the corner. Jason Capono available? Fine. We'll sign him. I mean, that's all you need, and the rest is going to give you a ring.
I think it's a little too obvious. I think if I were going to bet my house, if I were to bet a house on this, not my house, but if I were to bet,
your house is very, I mean, it's nice.
Something of value to me on this, I would go under. I would bet under on 1.5 titles in the next 3 years, because there's just too much potential for something there to go bad. Kawhi Leonard has a history of injury. LeBron James is 35 years old, and as you just said, has played the 3rd most minutes of any player in NBA history. There are a lot of good teams out there that I feel are getting better, and everything kind of has to go right to win a championship, including health. Load management has changed that dynamic a little bit, but if I had to place a bet on this, I would go under 1.5 in the next 3 years. How about you?
I'm going to take over 1.5, and I'm betting Caron Butler's Lake House as my as my bet there. But I really do think when you look at the rest of the West, and I understand that there are some of these teams that have gotten better. I would point to the Jazz. There are plenty of teams that have gotten better. I still think if you put a collection of those 3 players, Kawhi, LeBron, AD, I just don't know how many teams are going to be able to actually beat them. And we've forgotten what LeBron does in playoff time.
Bontemps, under or over?
I'm going under, and you made a bunch of good points. The other one I would point out is the Lakers will have no depth on this team. You go back to 2010, the Heat had 3 guys in their prime, all mid-20s, right? They didn't have enough to win that first year. And LeBron, again, as you said, he's 35. The other guys have had injury issues. So if you look at it that way, there's a good chance they don't win this first year. All right, then they have to win the next 2. Well, then if they have one injury, it doesn't happen. So, yeah.
So we got 2 overs, 2 unders. Go ahead, break a tie.
Way over. way over. I mean, this year, let's say Kawhi joins the Lakers later this afternoon, okay? This year, they would be odds-on favorites to win the championship. And then, as you mentioned, they wouldn't be that deep. But every season, they would have more players that would want to join them. Every year, they would get better and better. They would build around those 3. So they would be the odds-on favorite this year, and those odds would just get better and better for the next 2 following years.
Well, and you talk about the age factor and the minutes that LeBron plays. Well, here's the thing. You talk about load management. With those 3 guys during the course of the regular season, you could load manage and rotate kind of who you're giving some time off to try to lessen the wear and tear during the course of the regular season, because the regular season will not matter with this team. If this team comes together this way and you have those 3, what matters is being healthy in the postseason. If you're healthy in the postseason and you get those extra day off in between games, it's over.
Just remember, the Warriors had more star power with 4 guys, and they had more depth, and they didn't win this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're an injury away from everything turning. That's always the case in the NBA. It feels like it happens a little more frequently these days. So that's what's happening at the very top of the league. How about the teams who had the 1st and 3rd picks, respectively, in this past year's NBA draft? They will match up tonight.